My name is Joelle Whitfield, and I was 41 the morning I found out my husband's family had been paying my mortgage out of an account I didn't know existed, and the reason they finally told me was because they wanted it back. I was standing in my own kitchen, the one Marcus and I bought 8 years ago with what I thought was our money, holding a letter from a law office I'd never heard of, when my mother-in-law called to ask, in the gentlest voice you've ever heard, whether I'd be willing to sign the house over. Not sell it. Sign it over. Like it was a library book that had come due. And the reason she gave me, the actual words out of her actual mouth, are the reason I haven't spoken to that woman in 14 months. If you're new here, welcome to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary women get handed impossible situations by the people who are supposed to love them best and find a way through without losing themselves in the process. Get comfortable, because this one starts with a letter I wasn't supposed to see, and it ends with me finally understanding exactly who built my life and who just signed the paperwork for it. I should tell you about Marcus first, because none of this makes sense without him. He died 14 months ago, in March, of a heart thing nobody saw coming. 44 years old, ran 3 miles every other day, ate the way his cardiologist told him to, and his heart just stopped one Tuesday afternoon while he was reviewing blueprints at his desk. He was an architect, good one, mid-career, the kind who still got excited about load-bearing walls. I run a flower shop 2 towns over, small place, mostly weddings and funerals, which is a strange business to be in when your own husband dies and you find yourself on the wrong side of the counter for once, picking out your own arrangement instead of someone else's. We had 11 years together. No kids, which was its own grief we'd made peace with separately and then together, in that order. Just us and his family, who I'd always experienced as warm in the way a sun lamp is warm. Plenty of light, not much heat you could actually feel on your skin. His mother is Evelyn. His father, Roger, died when Marcus was 26, so it had been Evelyn running things for a long time, and Evelyn ran things the way some women run church bake sales, with a smile that never once suggested she might be flexible. Marcus had one sister, Patrice, for years younger, married to a man named Dale who sold commercial real estate and talked about it at every single holiday, like it was the only interesting subject available to mankind. The mornings are the hardest part now. I open the shop at 6 because the flower market runs early, and I drive past our old neighborhood sometimes on purpose, just to see the porch light Marcus installed the summer before he died, the one with the motion sensor he was so proud of. I still flip it on out of habit even though I haven't lived in that house in 4 months, which is its own story, and the one I need to tell you. 3 weeks after the funeral, I started going through Marcus's home office, the way you do, slow and underwater, touching things like they might bruise. His desk drawers were full of the ordinary debris of a careful man, warranty cards, an old phone he meant to recycle, a folder of blueprints for a renovation we'd talked about and never started. And then, at the very back of the bottom drawer, under a stack of tax returns going back 6 years, I found a manila envelope with my name on it. Not Joelle. My full name, Joelle Marie Whitfield, in Marcus's handwriting, the careful block print he used for labeling things he wanted found later. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten letter, dated about 4 months before he died. He must have known something, not that he was going to die. I don't think he knew that, but men who grew up watching their fathers manage money quietly sometimes get a feeling, and Marcus had apparently gotten one, because the letter started with, "If you're reading this." I should have told you this years ago, and I'm sorry I didn't. What he told me in that letter was that the down payment on our house, the one I'd always understood came from his signing bonus at the firm and our combined savings, had actually come almost entirely from his mother. $60,000. Evelyn had given it to him the year we bought the house, on the condition, his word, condition, that it never be mentioned to me, because, in Evelyn's words to him at the time, Joelle doesn't need to know where the floor under her feet came from. She just needs to be grateful for it without knowing who to thank. I read that line maybe 6 times standing in his office with dust still settling around me. grateful without knowing who to thank. As if gratitude could exist as some kind of ambient quality in a house, separate from facts, separate from truth. As if my mother-in-law had decided, 8 years earlier, that I should walk around inside a debt I didn't know I owed. The letter went on. Marcus wrote that he'd hated keeping it from me, that he'd argued with his mother about it more than once, that she'd framed it as protecting our marriage. She said you'd feel small, like charity, and I believed her because I wanted to believe the easy thing. And that he was telling me now on paper because something in him wanted the truth to exist somewhere, even if he never worked up the nerve to say it to my face. He ended it asking me to forgive him and asking me, if it ever came up, to remember that the house was ours regardless of where the money came from, because we'd paid every mortgage payment together for 8 years out of our own income. I sat on the floor of his office for a long time after I read that. Not angry yet. Just strange, the way you feel when you learn a fact that rearranges a room you thought you already knew the layout of. I didn't do anything with the letter right away. I folded it back into its envelope and I put it in my dresser, under a stack of sweaters, and for the better part of a year, I let it sit there while I did the actual work of widowhood, closing accounts, changing names on insurance, learning how a flower shop survives when the person who used to fix the delivery van for free is gone. I went to Evelyn's house for holidays because that's what you do, and I sat at her table, and I watched her pass dishes and correct Patrice's children's table manners, and I never once mentioned the letter, partly out of grief fog and partly, I think, because some part of me wasn't ready to find out what kind of person she actually was. I found out anyway, because Evelyn doesn't let things sit the way I do. It started small, the way these things do. A comment at Easter about how the house must feel so big for just you now. Have you thought about what makes sense going forward? A phone call in May where she asked, almost casually, whether I'd had the house appraised since Marcus passed, just for estate purposes. Dear, nothing to worry about. I gave vague answers because I genuinely didn't understand yet what she was building toward. I thought she was just being Evelyn, intrusive in the specific managerial way she'd always been intrusive, treating other people's lives like properties she still held the deed to. Then in June, the letter came. Not Marcus's letter, an actual letter, on actual letterhead, from a law firm in the city, addressed to me, informing me that Evelyn Whitfield wished to formalize a prior financial arrangement regarding the property at our address, and that her attorney would be in touch to discuss the return of contributed equity. I stood in my kitchen holding that letter, the cold paper, the careful lawyer language for something that was actually very simple. She wanted her $60,000 back, except now, 8 years later, with the house worth nearly double what we paid for it. The return of contributed equity didn't mean $60,000. It meant a proportional share. It meant, when I finally got someone to do the math for me, somewhere over $110,000, because apparently grief gives you a crash course in real estate appreciation whether you want one or not. I called her because I genuinely thought there had to be a mistake, some overzealous lawyer who'd misunderstood a casual family conversation. Evelyn answered on the second ring, and her voice was warm the way it always was, warm like stage lighting. "Oh, honey, I'm so glad you called," she said. "I wanted to talk to you myself before the formal letter, but Dale insisted we go through Patrice's husband's firm to keep things clean." Dale insisted. Of course Dale insisted. The man who'd never once in 11 years asked me a single question about myself had apparently developed strong opinions about my finances. "Evelyn," I said, "what is this? What do you mean clean?" "Sweetheart," she said, and I want you to hear how she said it, like she was about to hand me something soft. "You have to understand that money was always meant to come back to the family eventually. It was never really a gift in the way Marcus might have explained it to you. It was more of an investment in keeping things in the family line. And now that Marcus is gone, well, there isn't really a Marcus line anymore, is there? There's just you. And I think you can understand why Patrice and I feel that money should come back to where it started. There it was. There isn't really a Marcus line anymore. There's just you." 11 years of marriage, and the moment my husband stopped being alive to anchor me to that family, I became an unrelated party occupying a house that belonged, in her mind, to a bloodline I wasn't part of. I asked her, very quietly, whether she understood that Marcus and I had paid the mortgage on that house every month for 8 years out of money we earned. Whether the $60,000, whatever it had been called at the time, had functioned as a gift for 8 straight years without one single request for repayment, without one mention, without, I made myself say this part, without me even knowing it existed until I found a letter my dead husband left explaining why his own mother told him to keep it secret from me. There was a pause on the line, the kind where you can hear someone deciding how much of the truth to give you. "He told you that," she said. Not a question. Flat, like she was recalculating something on a spreadsheet. "He left me a letter," I said. "He wrote it months before he died. He told me everything. That it was your money, that you told him I should be grateful without knowing who to thank." Another pause, longer this time, and when she spoke again, the warmth was gone, replaced by something brisker, more efficient, like she'd switched from one prepared script to another. "Well, then you understand the position. Family money is family money, Joelle. It doesn't matter how many years pass. It was never meant to just disappear into a house that, frankly, will go to whoever you eventually remarry, or to no one at all if you don't, and either way it leaves the family entirely. Patrice has 2 children. That money should be helping raise Marcus's actual nieces and nephews, not sitting in drywall. Sitting in drywall. My home, the one Marcus and I picked out together, painted together, where we'd planned to put a nursery and then quietly stopped planning it and made our peace and kept living anyway, to her it was drywall holding her money hostage. I hung up without saying anything else because I genuinely did not trust what would come out of my mouth, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time looking at that lawyer letter. And somewhere in that hour I stopped being confused and started being something colder and more useful. Here's what I want you to understand about grief. The kind that comes from losing a spouse suddenly. It puts you in a fog for months where you can barely choose a brand of coffee, and then one day, usually triggered by something small and stupid, the fog burns off all at once, and you can see with this terrible clarity. That phone call was my fog burning off. I sat at that table and I thought about every Thanksgiving I'd shown up to, every birthday gift I'd agonized over for a woman who apparently saw me as an unfortunate but tolerable accessory to her son, every single time I'd called her mom. Out of politeness, because Marcus liked it when I did, and I felt something in my chest go very still and very clear, like a road at 4 a.m. before anyone else is awake. I want to tell you I had a plan immediately. I didn't. What I had, first, was a sister-in-law problem, because Patrice called the next day, and Patrice does not warm anything up before she serves it. "I heard you got the letter," she said. "No hello." "I did," I said. "Look, Joelle, I know this is awkward, but you have to see it from our side. That money should have gone towards something that benefits the actual family. Dale and I have been carrying the cost of Connor's tuition almost entirely on our own, and Mom's retirement account took a hit in the last few years, and meanwhile you're sitting in a 4-bedroom house by yourself. It just doesn't make sense for you to keep all of it when there are people who actually need it. People who actually need it. As if my house were a casserole that hadn't been finished and somebody else's family was hungry. Patrice," I said, "your brother and I lived in that house together for 8 years. I have made every mortgage payment since he died, alone, on a flower shop's income, because I am not going to lose the last place that still smells like him. And now you and your mother want me to either hand over $110,000 I don't have, or sell the house I'm currently grieving in to fund your son's tuition. That's not fair," she snapped. "You're acting like we're the villains here. We're trying to be practical. Mom's not getting any younger, and the truth is, Joelle, you're not really family anymore. Not in the way that counts. You're Marcus's widow. That's a real thing, and I'm sorry, but it's not the same as being his sister or his mother. Blood is blood. Blood is blood. I'd heard variations of that line my whole life from my own family, growing up the way I did, but I'd never expected to hear it used as a legal argument against the house where I'd buried my marriage. I told her I needed to think, and I hung up, and that was the last warm-toned conversation I had with either of them, because 2 days later the actual attorney letter arrived with a deadline, 30 days to respond regarding the contributed equity matter. And I understood that whatever family feeling had existed in that house for 11 years had just been formally converted into a transaction with a due date. I did the thing I always do when I don't know what else to do. I went to work. The shop needed me, a big wedding order, fall colors, a bride who kept changing her mind about whether she wanted dahlias or not, and there's something about working with your hands when your head is on fire that keeps you upright. I trimmed stems and wired bouquets and let my staff think I was just tired, the way everyone assumed I was just tired for the better part of a year now, and underneath all of it I was turning that lawyer letter over and over like a stone in my pocket. It was my shop manager, Denise, who actually cracked something open for me, completely by accident. Denise has worked for me for 9 years, raised 3 kids on a flower shop salary and a stubborn streak, and she's the only person I'd told the full story to, mostly because she caught me crying into a bucket of ranunculus and wouldn't let it go until I explained. "Did you ever actually see proof it was a gift?" she asked. "Like, on paper?" Because my cousin went through something almost like this with her in-laws, except the other direction. They tried to claim money was a loan after they'd called it a gift for 15 years, and the bank paperwork saved her whole life. I told her I had Marcus's letter, his handwriting, explaining what his mother had told him. Denise shook her head. "That's good, that's real, but that's secondhand. That's him telling you what she told him. You need something with her own hand on it, or something that proves the money moved the way a gift moves and not the way a loan moves." I went home that night and did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled every box from our closing 8 years ago, every piece of paper from the mortgage, because somewhere in the part of my brain that wasn't underwater, I remembered something. When we bought the house, our lender had asked about a large deposit that showed up in our account a few months before closing. The same amount, $60,000, almost to the dollar. I remembered Marcus dealing with the paperwork side of that, telling me it was just a documentation thing, and I remembered signing something myself without reading it closely, the way you do when you're 28 pages into a closing and your hand is cramping. It took me an evening of digging through file boxes in the garage, but I found our closing file, the actual physical folder our title company, and 8 years later, she was sending me a law firm letter calling it contributed equity she wanted returned. She hadn't just told her son to keep me ignorant. She had personally signed a sworn statement directly contradicting the very thing she was now trying to collect on, and she had apparently forgotten, or assumed I'd never find, the one document that made the entire claim collapse. I didn't call her. I didn't call Patrice. I did the unglamorous, unsatisfying thing that turned out to matter more than any phone call could have. I called my own attorney, a woman named Frances Oduya I'd used years ago for the shop's lease, and I asked her, calmly, whether a gift letter like that held up against a later demand for repayment. Frances actually laughed, not unkindly. "Joelle, that's about as airtight as these things get. A gift letter exists for exactly one purpose, to prevent precisely what's happening to you right now. If she's suing or threatening to sue for repayment, this document doesn't just help your case. It potentially exposes her to consequences of her own, because she made a sworn representation to a federally regulated lender that turned out, by her own current claim, to have been false. I'd send this to her attorney before they waste any more of your time." I want to tell you I felt triumphant in that moment. Mostly I just felt tired and a little sad, in the specific way you feel sad when you finally have proof that someone you loved, or tried to love, was never quite who you needed them to be. But underneath the tired, there was something else starting, something that had been building since that first phone call with the warm stage lighting voice. I wasn't just going to send a letter and let it end quietly through lawyers passing paper back and forth. I'd spent 11 years at that family's table being polite about things I should have questioned, and I'd spent 14 months grieving alone while they treated my house like an asset they'd left in a relative's name. I wanted them to hear it from me, face to face, the same way they'd sent that lawyer letter without the courtesy of telling me themselves first. I wanted to be in a room with all three of them, Evelyn, Patrice, Dale, and watch them understand, in real time, what they'd actually built when they tried to weaponize a word like family against a woman who'd buried their son and brother alone. Patrice's daughter, Marcus's niece, was turning 16 in 3 weeks, and Evelyn was hosting the party, the big kind she always hosted, 20-some relatives in her backyard under string lights, the kind of event where everyone performs being close. I'd been invited weeks earlier, before any of this started, a generic group text from Patrice that I'd never bothered to formally decline. I decided I would go, not to make a scene. I want to be clear about that because I know how this sounds. I didn't want to stand up at a 16th birthday party and humiliate anybody in front of a child whose only crime was being related to people who'd disappointed me. What I wanted was much smaller and much more precise. I wanted to hand Evelyn a copy of that gift letter, privately, in front of Patrice and Dale, before they'd had any more time to build a story about me to the rest of the family. I wanted the conversation to happen on my terms, with the actual document on the table, instead of through a law firm's careful language designed to make me feel like the unreasonable party. I drove to the party 3 weeks later with a manila folder on the passenger seat, the gift letter copy inside it, next to Marcus's handwritten letter, which I decided, after a lot of thought, that I would also bring, because I wanted Evelyn to know that her son had told me the truth before she ever tried to take it back. The backyard was full of string lights and the particular noise of a party where everyone's trying too hard. Evelyn saw me come through the side gate and her face did something complicated. A flicker of surprise quickly smoothed into hostess warmth, because whatever else she is, Evelyn doesn't let her face show a crack in public for long. Patrice was by the dessert table. Dale was holding court near the grill, talking, predictably, about a commercial listing. I let an hour pass. I talked to Marcus's niece, the birthday girl, told her how proud her uncle would have been of her, and meant it, because none of what was coming was hers to carry. I ate a slice of cake I didn't taste. And then, when the gift opening was done and people had drifted into smaller clusters around the yard, I found Evelyn near the patio doors, refilling a drink tray, and I asked quietly if she had a minute. She must have heard something in my voice, because her hostess' smile thinned just slightly. "Of course, honey," she said, and I could hear the practiced warmth working overtime. I asked Patrice and Dale to join us too, just the four of us, stepping a little apart from the party, near the side of the house. Tried to make this happen through paper without ever once looking me in the eye, and I think you owe me that much, at minimum, after 11 years. I opened the folder. I took out Marcus's letter first, and I held it where she could see his handwriting, and I watched something drain out of her face the same way it had over the phone weeks earlier. "Marcus left me a letter," I said, "before he died. He told me where the down payment really came from. He told me what you said to him, that I should be grateful without knowing who to thank." He wrote that down in his own hand, months before his heart stopped, because some part of him knew he should have told me himself and never found the courage. Patrice's mouth had gone tight. Dale, for once, had stopped talking, beer forgotten in his hand. And then I continued. Taking out the second page, I went back through our closing documents because something about your story didn't sit right. And I found this. I held up the gift letter. Evelyn's eyes moved to it, and I watched her recognize it instantly, the particular stillness of someone seeing a thing they'd genuinely forgotten still existed. "You signed this," I said. "Your own name, your own hand." It says, in plain language, that the $60,000 was a gift, no repayment expected, not a loan in any form. You signed a document swearing that to a federal lender. And then, 8 years later, you sent me a law firm letter calling it contributed equity and asking for over $100,000 back. I had an attorney look at this. She says you don't have a case. She also says that swearing something false on a document like this isn't just embarrassing for you, Evelyn. It's a real problem, the kind that doesn't go away because you're somebody's mother. The silence that followed was the kind I'd been bracing for and hoping I wouldn't get, the kind where you can hear the party continuing 20 feet away, laughter and string lights, completely unaware that something was ending quietly in the shadow of the house. Dale found his voice first, because Dale, like most loud people, can't tolerate a silence he isn't filling. Look, nobody's trying to commit fraud here, Joelle. Let's not get dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, I said, still quiet, still even. I'm reading your own signature. There's nothing dramatic about a fact. Patrice tried next, and her voice had the particular brittleness of someone watching their argument collapse in real time. You're really going to use a piece of paper to keep money that should be helping this family when you don't even have kids, when that house is just sitting there. Patrice, I said, I buried your brother alone. I have made every single mortgage payment by myself for 14 months. I have grieved in that house with nobody from this family checking on me more than twice, and the 2 times you did call, it was about money, not about me. You don't get to tell me what that house should be for. I get to decide that, because it's mine, and because the paperwork, your mother's own signature, says it always was. I turned back to Evelyn, who hadn't said a word since I'd shown her the letter, who was standing very still in a way I'd never once seen her stand in 11 years of knowing her, because Evelyn always had a next line ready. Always had the room managed 3 moves ahead, and for the first time I was watching her run out of moves in real time. I'm not here to ruin your night, I told her. Your granddaughter's having a birthday. I came because I wanted you to hear this from my mouth, not from a letter, and I wanted Patrice and Dale to hear it too, so nobody can pretend later that I never explained myself. I'm not paying you anything. I'm not selling the house. And after tonight, I'd like you to tell your attorney to drop this, because if it goes any further, the next person who sees this gift letter won't be a sympathetic daughter-in-law standing quietly in your backyard. It'll be a judge, and then everyone here. I tipped my head slightly toward the party, the string lights, the laughing relatives who had no idea what was happening 20 feet from the dessert table, will eventually know exactly why. Evelyn's voice, when it finally came, was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Marcus shouldn't have told you. Some things are easier left. Easier for you, I said. Not for me. I lived in a house for 8 years not knowing who to thank because you decided gratitude mattered more to you than honesty did to me. That's not protecting a marriage, Evelyn. That's just controlling one. I folded the letters back into the folder. I told Patrice's daughter goodbye on my way out, hugged her, told her happy birthday, and meant every word of it, and I walked back through the side gate into the cooling evening air, and I drove home with the windows down even though it was getting cold, because I needed to feel something moving past me that wasn't a held breath. The lawyer letter never escalated. Francis sent a formal response a week later with a copy of the gift letter attached, and Evelyn's attorney went quiet within days, the particular fast quiet of a case that someone realizes they should never have filed. I heard, through Patrice's brief, stiff phone call a month later, that Dale had been the one pushing hardest for the legal route, his commercial real estate brain treating my grief like an asset he could appraise and liquidate, and that Evelyn had let him because some part of her genuinely believed, the way she'd always believed, that a gift can quietly become a debt the moment the giver decides they want it back. I didn't go no contact dramatically. I just stopped initiating, the way you let a phone stop ringing on its own instead of unplugging it. Evelyn sent 1 card at Christmas, generic, store-bought, no note, and I didn't send one back, and that told both of us everything we needed to know about where things stood. Patrice texts occasionally, mostly about her daughter, and I answer those, because that girl didn't choose any of this, and I'm not going to make her pay for her grandmother's signature. I'm still in the house. I refinished the porch with Marcus's motion sensor light still mounted where he put it, still flips on automatically every time I come up the front steps, and some nights I stand under it longer than I need to. just because it feels like something of is still working exactly the way he built it to work. Denise and I expanded the shop last spring, took on a second location, and there's a framed photo of Marcus on the counter that customers sometimes ask about, and I get to tell them, plainly, who he was and what he meant. The way I never got the chance to do with the people who were supposed to already know. I think about that line of Evelyn's sometimes, the one she used on the phone. There isn't really a Marcus line anymore. There's just you. She meant it as a way to erase me. What she actually did was hand me the cleanest, truest thing anyone in that family ever gave me. There wasn't a Marcus line anymore. There was just me, standing in the house we built, holding the one piece of paper that proved, in her own handwriting, exactly who'd been telling the truth the whole time. That's the whole lesson, if there is one. People will use the word family like a key that opens any door they want opened, until the day you find the one document that proves the lock was never theirs to turn. Keep your paperwork. Trust your letters. And when somebody tells you you're not really family anymore, let that be the moment you finally, fully believe them and build the rest of your life accordingly. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight, and tell me in the comments who actually showed up for you when it counted. I'll see you in the next one.